one video request I would always get a lot is, what is it like being black in Japan? And so now I'm finally answering this question. What is it like being black in Japan? So I will be speaking based off my personal experience being a black American in Japan. Overall, Japan is really excited to see tons of foreigners, especially people nowadays. Although in Japan, they don't really see too many black people, but as a foreigner, they do stare a lot. And I mean a lot. You can be riding a train, you'll be stared at. Walk into the store, you'll be stared at. Although Japan is really excited about seeing foreigners, there just aren't that many foreigners that go to Japan. Japan is mostly Japanese. Shocker, right? So it only makes sense that since they're not very used to seeing foreigners, that they tend to stare a lot and be very curious about where you're from. Although it is a bit different from being white versus black in Japan. Because white people tend to be seen a lot in the media, they're very familiar with what white people look like. But the media doesn't really portray that many black people, so a lot of times you can be the first black person they'll ever see. This has actually happened with me. I remember once I went to go visit a city in Japan called Gifu. When I was in Gifu, it was me and a couple other friends, and we decided to go to this dart place. It was like a competitive dart gaming arcade thing, I'm not sure. Never seen one before, but it was pretty fun. And the store owner, he never never seen a black person before. So he was so intrigued by me. So we ended up playing darts together and various other like board games that they had at that cafe. And mind you, this was probably about like 2 a.m. and he was the only one there. So we're just some foreigners who just come in and we're just like, hey, we're bored and we've never been in this city before and we're just kind of exploring, so what's up? So we're playing darts and apparently I'm either really good or really bad. I would either get like close to the bullseye or like the ceiling. So like this guy is like cracking up. He's like, oh my gosh, like you just threw a dart at the ceiling, like you're so bad but it's funny. And he's just like laughing so much. So we'll just call the store owner Tachan. So I went to the bathroom and when I came back, one of my friends told me they were talking to Tachan. And apparently Tachan told him that, oh my gosh, I love black people. Like they're so goofy and like terrible at darts, but it's funny. And apparently had like a really good impression on black people because I was the first one he's ever seen. I'm so sorry if there are any black people out there that's pro at darts. I blew that. Sorry, my bad. But it was also really interesting to think that, wow, I'm the first black person he's ever seen. And because of that, his impression of black people were all based on me. And it kind of makes me think, how common is this? But it is true. There aren't that many black people, and especially since we're not represented in the media in Japan, it's really common for them to not really know. Cities within Tokyo, you'll definitely see tons of black people there. By tons, I don't mean like a lot, but more than usual, I guess I should say. Which leads me to this actually. In Tokyo, there are tons and tons of cities, and yes, you do see a lot more diversity in terms of race in Tokyo. That's just because that's kind of like the major city hub, so it makes more sense that there's a lot more foreigners there. But one thing that I found kind of like fascinating was that in Tokyo there are a lot of more Africans than there are like African Americans, or like meaning that there are tons of people from African countries versus like America or Europe or Australia. So actually when I had visited Tokyo, a lot of people assumed I was African versus American because they tend to assume that Americans are white, blonde, blue eyes, and that if you have dark skin, you're African. So they don't really like associate too much with Africans being in America. Same with other Asians actually. Even if you're Chinese American, Korean American, even Japanese American, they're just gonna assume that you're not American because typically they associate America with white people. And so I remember stepping into this shop that sold African goods, and it was actually ran by a Japanese woman, and she got super excited because she's like, oh my gosh, this girl from Africa just came visited me at my shop and I love African things. And she was just like so excited and even asked what part of Africa I was from. And I kind of had to tell her, oh, sorry, I'm not from Africa, I'm actually American. Born in Ohio, kind of not that exciting. And she was pretty shocked actually, but she was still pretty excited to see me regardless. It is pretty interesting that they do assume that you are from Africa though, just because you have dark skin. It's like, no, America's pretty diverse in terms of what we have culturally. Another thing too that they'll always assume is that you're super into hip hop and rap. Although hip hop is pretty integrated in our culture, not every black person is super big into it, which is totally fine. So a lot of times people will come to me and ask me, oh, do I know this hip hop song? Or like how much I love basketball and stuff. And I'm like, no, I don't know this artist. I like basketball, but I'm not super big into it. And sometimes too, because of the small amount of black people they do get in their media, they'll assume that you're like some famous black person. Or sometimes they'll like come to me and like, hey, you look like Beyonce. And I'm like, whoa, no I don't. We are totally different. Which just shows that they don't see that many black people within their media. Another thing too is if you're planning on visiting Japan and you're concerned about hair, our hair is totally different from Asian hair or white hair and so forth. So it is a bit harder to find good hair shops for black hair or like a hair salon for black hair. Again, if you live on the countryside, it's probably impossible, but if you do live in major cities like cities in Tokyo, it's probably not that tough to find them, but you probably would have to dig pretty deep to try to look for some. So if hair thing is definitely your concern, I definitely consider brushing up on how to do your own hair. Get it brushing up because you brush your hair, you brush your hair. Another thing about Japan too is that they're pretty ignorant in terms of like what black people are. I mean, we're just people, obviously. But what I mean by that is like, for example, we have dark skin because we have more melanin. However, I remember once when I was volunteering at an orphanage, one of the guys asked me if I would just like painted my skin dark or if I was just like really dirty. And I was like, no, I just showered, thank you. So you might get offended by that. I was pretty offended, but I kind of understood that like they just don't know. It's not culturally educated about black people. And maybe 100 years down the road, maybe black people won't be a very unique thing there. So I would really suggest going. It's really fun. I loved my time there. I'll definitely be back. So don't be nervous, don't be scared. Just do it, go, have fun. If you have any questions or concerns, feel free to just post below and I'll gladly answer them. So thank you for watching. Bye.